This is how to install a power cord. A couple of things that you may need. If you're doing an exterior application, you may want a heat gun for the heat shrink and also some silicone. This actually works good for two things. One, to waterproof. It also, when you put a little pea-sized drop into the tubing here, it will act as lubrication. So it actually helps to install the rope light. Makes it a little easier. So the first thing you need to know is which end of the rope light to install it on. Basically, one of those wires is positive and one is negative. So if you put the power cord on the wrong end, it won't light up. You have reverse polarity. All you do is pull it off that end and reinstall it onto the opposite end, and then it should work. So in this case, I do know by the direction of the diodes that this is my power end and this is my end cap end. So the first thing I like to do is I like to use the power connector. I like to use just one prong, one sharp point, and I like to poke it into the conductor wire. So I will just simply grab it, find the conductor wire, and push the sharp point into the wire. You can work it. If you need a pair of pliers to give you some extra grip, go ahead, but work it right in there. You want to see the actual strands of wire expanding around the sharp point. That's how you know you have it in the center. Anything else is not a good electrical connection. What happens is the sharp prongs like to go inside to the silicone sheathing of the rope light, and that's just not a good connection. So once you have both wires kind of pre-poked, you don't have to do that. That's just something that I like to do. I think it's a little bit easier. Go ahead and just install it. Sometimes, like I say, a pair of pliers help you push it in better. There you go. Power connector install. The next step, I like to take a little bit of silicone, just a dab, maybe a pea-sized dab, put it in there. Like I said, this will act as lubrication and it'll also help waterproof. Don't forget to slide your heat shrink over your tubing right now. Don't wait. If you wait, you'll have to pull the power cord back off. Now, the next thing is the prongs are offset from center. Same with the holes. So you can look at your power cord, look at your prongs, make sure you're lining it up right. Go ahead and install it. Smear the silicone around the sheathing. Make sure your holes are lined up properly and go ahead and push it in. If you just use a dab of silicone, you can actually see some of the silicone compress. So you want it good and compressed, just like that. All right, so now we want to know if this works. We do not want to install the heat shrink and then realize that we put the cord on the wrong end. So go ahead, plug it in. It works, we're good. So I'm going to unplug it and I'm going to go ahead and install the heat shrink. This will actually take a few minutes. I'll just go all the way around that heat shrink and work it like this until it's nice and gooey. Once it's gooey and it's shrunk up nice and tight around it, then we're all set. One other thing I want to talk about is during an exterior installation, you want to keep the water from being able to just roll down the rope light into the power cord. Even though you took precautions like heat shrink and you may have used silicone in here as well, you still want to keep the water from being able to just roll right down and into it. So if you can, create a drip loop so that the water can come down the rope light, hit the drip loop, and drip off and not go into the power cord. That is really key to success because water is always your worst. It's very easy, but remember one thing first, always unplug it. It is 120 volts, so if you cut it with the power on, nothing good is going to happen. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is find the cut marks. This is Endurabrand rope light. There's cut marks every 30 inches. So if you go to the end of your rope light and go back 30 inches, or go to the beginning of your rope light and go up 30 inches, you will find the cut marks. So another thing to look for are the crossover wires. I have one here and I have one here. This one is the beginning of this 30-inch section, and this one is the end of this 30-inch section. So wherever you see back-to-back crossover wires, that is where you can cut your rope light. So starting right here, go approximately 30 inches. You should be able to actually physically see the cut marks. I have the crossover wires here and here, and the cut marks here. So cutting it, you can use a razor knife, a pocket knife. What we like to use here is tubing cutters. You see this blade right here. This is where somebody actually cut it when it was powered up. That's what happens to your blade when you cut it with the power on. So to cut it, find your cut mark. I'm going to use the tubing cutters because I think this is the easiest. And go ahead and line it up and just cut through it. It's really that easy. Some tips is when I cut this is the end that I know I'm putting on my end cap. So I actually like to cheat a little bit and cut it a little bit closer to this end because this is the end that I will be installing a power cord. So I want to have a little bit more room here to install the power connector. Helpful hint. The power off. Okay, interior application, you're done. So if this was an exterior application, we need to take a couple extra steps here to make sure that water will not damage the rope light. First thing I want to do is just put a dab of silicone in it. So just a little dab like that. Start to install it, give it a little bit of a twist. Let's get that silicone all over the rope light as much as we can. Push it on nice and tight. There we go. The next thing you want to do is install the heat shrink. So I'll keep the heat shrink just maybe a 1/16 past the end cap like that. We'll shrink it in. This will take a few minutes. You're going to want to go all the way around the heat shrink until the heat shrink is snug. I'll try to get most of the air bubbles out of it. There you have it. Looks pretty good. All right, end cap is installed. Now it's time to install the rope light. One thing I want to add here is about water. So because it is always our worst enemy, we do not want to install it to where water can just run down your rope light and down into your end cap. Eventually, it will infiltrate the internal part of the rope light. So what you'd want to do is make sure that you always create a drip loop. So if your rope light is coming down the rake of your house or something like that, let that water come down, hit your drip loop, drip off, and not into your end cap.